The skill of finding linear measurement is a daily activity that is essential for students to comprehend. These skills are everywhere we look, from finding the height of a person, buying the correct windshield wipers, marking lines of a football field, and even scrapbooking. In order for students to understand the concepts of length measurement, there are many different aspects that they will have to learn. First, the child and the teacher must understand that there is a difference between length and distance. According to Michelle Stephan and Douglas Clements, length is a characteristic of an object and can be found by quantifying how far it is between endpoints of the object. Distance, however, refers to the empty space between 2 points. Students next have to be able to identify the unit. This can be done as a standard unit or a non-standard unit. When using the U.S. system of measurement, standard units of length would be units such as inches, feet, yards, and miles. Before students use standard units, they will use non-standard units. This includes measuring with their feet, hands, or another object that they can find around the classroom. When taught in an inquiry fashion, let the students come up with different rules for measuring. After practice with certain non-standard units, they will realize the following. First, to make sure that the students come up with the same answer every time, they must use the same size unit. When measuring with different sizes, the end answer will never be the same. They will also see that they must be consistent with the unit that they are using. If they use different objects every time that they measure something, it will be very difficult to determine the length. When creating a non-standard unit of measure, it is important to keep the directionality of the unit consistent. When the footprint is rotated 90 degrees in this example, the student no longer comes up with the same answer for the overall length. Iterating the unit is necessary when measuring. This means that the unit needs to be placed end to end alongside the object that is being measured. This is because any gaps in between units will cause inconsistent results. The student needs to iterate the unit until it fills up the length of the object. To reveal the student's understanding of measurement, have him or her make their own variation of a ruler. If the student haphazardly draws hash marks that are various distances apart, it is apparent that the student does not understand the concept of iterating the same unit. If the student makes a conscious effort to divide up the ruler into congruent segments, he or she is using the strategy of partitioning. Partitioning an object means that a person is mentally slicing up the overall length into same-sized units. This can be done by folding or using another object to use as a spacer for placing the next hash mark. Once the students grasp these basic concepts, they can delve further into the idea of partitioning by breaking up their individual units into smaller units. The next important concept that is important for children to understand is transitivity. Transitivity uses reason to compare 3 or more objects together. The first form of transitivity involves equal length. If object 1 is equal in length to object 2, and object 2 is equal in length to object 3, then object 1 and object 3 are also equal in length. The next form of transitivity involves greater lengths. If the length of object 1 is greater than the length of object 2, and the length of object 2 is longer than object 3, then object 1 is longer than object 3. Finally, the last version of transitivity involves lengths that are shorter. If object 1 is less than the length of object 2, and object 2 is shorter than object 3, then object 1 is also shorter than object 3. Students in all grade levels should also understand conservation. Conservation is the understanding that if an object is moved, the length does not change. Oftentimes, the teacher will line up 2 objects of the same length. He or she will then pull the objects forward or off to the side. The student should be able to determine that these 2 objects are still equal in length. The next thing that is important when teaching measurements is to be aware of accumulation of distance. Many students, when first learning how to measure, want to find the distance from the beginning of the first iteration to the end of the last. In other words, when given a blank ruler, the student will mark 1 where the 0 should be. This also comes into play when measuring with non-standard units. One strategy to see if students truly understand how to measure an object is to rip off the ends of the paper ruler. Next, observe the way that they measure. If the student answers 10, then the student is looking at only the last number of the measurement instead of counting the spaces of the unit from the beginning of the object to the end. When using their feet to measure the distance between 2 points, the student will measure this in 2 ways. First, the student might measure the number of steps that he or she has taken. 1, 2. Second, the student might measure the number of feet that they have fit into the space. 1, 2, 3. If this moment arises, turn it into a teachable moment. Ask each of the groups to explain their answers. What is meant by the number 2 and 3? Find out what the students are thinking and have them decide for themselves which answer is correct. The next important concept in linear measurement is the relationship between number and measurement. According to Stephan and Clemens, measuring is related to number in that measuring is simply a case of counting. This is, however, more complicated when the teacher introduces discrete versus continuous units. Lawrence Spector explains that discrete numbers are cohesive and countable. These would be the whole numbers that are being measured: 3, 6, 2, 18. Continuous numbers are the numbers that are not used in counting, but instead essential for measuring. They are always a part of the whole: 1/2, 3/4, 1/4. To see if students understand the relationship between continuous and discrete numbers, lay out 2 rows of objects that are equal in length. One row should have more objects than the other. The student should be able to determine that the 2 rows are the same length. The student should also discuss the procedure that they want to do when there is extra space that their non-standard unit does not fill up. Have them decide whether they want to treat this as a discrete number and count the measurement as 4, or do they want to use a continuous number and decide that the number is about 3 1/4. This inquiry decision alone can build a child's understanding of measurement and partitioning. According to Jeffrey Barnett, when a student is learning measurement, there are 4 different stages that they go through. First, to measure an object, students will assign lengths for objects by tapping their finger along the side of the object. In the second stage, when asked to find the lengths for perimeter, the student will make hash marks along the sides, but they will be uneven and vary from side to side. In the third stage, the student will represent even hash marks along parallel sides, but not the entire perimeter. Finally, in the fourth stage, the student will realize that the parallel line segments will have the same measurement. They will either write in the numbers or draw out an iteration of units. Once the teacher knows which stage of understanding the student has accomplished, he or she can create lessons for the class to build skills of iteration, partitioning, transitivity, conservation, the accumulation of distance, and the relation between numbers and measurement.